Good evening everyone, we're finally getting a dual screen Android gaming tablet emulator, and this time around it's from Ayaneo and AYN. I have done a previous video on the OneXSugar. It was a transforming Android emulator. There is an extensive review on it. It's getting kind of mixed reviews right now from Retro Game Corp. I'll try to leave a link in the description. Even though that is what I wanted initially, what I cared more so for was just a straight up dual screen emulator. And we've had like workarounds, like for example with the Microsoft Duo, and then Retroid came out with a secondary screen for their Retroid Pocket 5, and I think it's compatible with the Retroid Pocket 4. And also, like I mentioned, Retro Game Corp has a review unit video going up. Also, TechDweeb, I believe, also has one. They're both pretty good and thorough reviewers that actually give hands-on impressions and all the technical stuff if you're interested. But today I want to talk about Ayan Neo Pocket DS and the AYN Thor, and why I guess I'm kind of excited for it. So Ayan Neo, it was announced, the Ayan Neo Pocket DS, we'll talk about that first. It was announced I think 2 or 3 months ago, and their Indiegogo went live earlier this week. And it is, as expected from Ayaneo, the premium version of the device as compared to AYN Thor. And the history with Ayaneo when dual screen emulation is they have had in the past their Ayaneo Pocket x86 Windows PC emulators from previous generations, and their current one. So they have 2 iterations, their original one and then also the 1S version that just came out earlier this year. But the difference between Windows handheld gaming and Android, or at the very least the breaking point for me, is one, the Windows versions are always way more expensive, and my YouTube, I haven't even been monetized yet, so that's out of the question. And also the battery life is significantly more efficient on the Android version because of optimization for the mobile chipset. And Ayaneo Pocket DS, Ayaneo, the names kind of blend together, but the Ayaneo Flip DS, it does have a mobile chipset, but it is geared towards more Windows, and having to run a full-fledged PC as compared to an Android is a lot more taxing on the battery and the processing power, like the GPU and CPU. So there's that difference in battery life. And I'm not looking to video edit and replace my PC setup. I have a laptop for anything that I need that's actually like outside of playing video games. So for me, the Android version of the dual screen handheld emulators is a better pick for me. So let's break down what we know about the Ayaneo Pocket DS versus the AYN Thor. And I don't know if this was a jab by AYN Thor, by AYN, but they barely announced it the week that Ayaneo Pocket DS launched their Indiegogo campaign, and I've heard of people canceling their Ayaneo Pocket DS pre-orders in order to just wait for the AYN Thor. So they came out with a teaser trailer earlier this week, and they've been posting details. They've been dripping out of details on Twitter ever since, like images of the pricing, the card SKUs, the weight and dimensions, and all that good stuff. Starting out with the Ayaneo Pocket DS, since it was the first to announce, and the Indiegogo is currently up if any of you are interested. Their starting price is at $399 compared to, well, I'm not going to compare it just yet, but their starting price is at $399 with their smallest SKU or lowest tier SKU being 1 tera. Yeah, let me pull that up. At 8 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of internal storage. And to be honest, I don't focus too much on internal storage when I'm making my purchase, because I know these all have micro SD slots which you can use to expand your storage, and from what I can tell, neither of these are requiring the express cards that, for example, Nintendo Switch 2 is requiring. So, and I believe the maximum micro SD card available on the market is like a 2 terabyte at this point, which is still cheaper than the 1 terabyte micro SD express card. So I wouldn't focus too much on the internal storage. Maybe you can argue that it'll run games faster, but I've been running my AYN Odin 2 Mini. All my ROMs and games and most of my programs are on the SD card itself, and I haven't noticed any significant lag. To be honest, I haven't tested the comparisons, but my gameplay has been smooth on across all emulators when it comes to working off of the SD card. So yeah, but the thing I will contend with is the amount of RAM, because when it comes to emulators like say the Switch, GameCube, Wii, Xbox, Winlator, like the more advanced you get, the more RAM you get. And the thing is with these emulators, you have to have more RAM than the original hardware in order to compensate that an emulator is just a virtual version of the existing hardware. Like for example, use the Nintendo Switch, the original one runs with 4 gigabytes of internal RAM, and so in order to run games on like Yuzu and Sudachi, you need at least, I would say, like 6, and that's even if the emulators are optimized enough to take full advantage of those 6 gigabytes on a per game basis, because some games run better than others depending on the optimization. That's why you're always seeing patches come out not as often as before, because the whole hiccup with Yuzu releasing a working emulator of Tears of the Kingdom before Tears of the Kingdom even came out, that was like the shot to the back of the head for Switch emulation. But ever since then, Switch emulation is kind of like a Hydra. You chop off one head and 6 more appears. We've had it's been a while since I've got into Switch emulation, but I know Yuzu, Ryujinx is one of the more prominent current ones. And Ryujinx doesn't have an Android version. They're mainly on Windows PC. Dang it, I can't name any right now because it's been a while, but yeah. So 8 gigabytes, and also it's not just for Switch but for Winlator emulation. It's been getting a lot more progress. Like in the beginning, I remember watching YouTube videos, seeing people run Fallout 3 and like older games like Borderlands 1, I think it was, on Winlator running on Android. And I'm pretty sure, and that was late last year, so I would think the Winlator team is still progressing. And I remember, for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the app, but there is an app that actually makes Winlator on Android more seamless. Like the shit that the community comes up with is astonishing and will always impress me. But yeah, that whole tangent was just to gush about why more RAM. I wouldn't get the first SKU because we probably need more RAM if you want to future-proof it. If you're only looking to play retro games, ignore everything I just said and get the lowest tier. Like if you just want to play Wii U, GameCube, and Wii U, 3DS, and DS. Well, because I'm naming those because it's a dual screen emulator. You can also play obviously all the other systems in between. And the thing with Wii U emulation, Cemu, it just recently launched for Android. I don't know how much optimization has been done. Like I mentioned, I haven't been doing much current console emulation recently, but I would imagine they've made pretty good progress. And also for Citra, I know that's another emulator that got shut down when Yuzu got gunned down, but there have been, similar to Yuzu, a lot of forks that have been created, like for example Lime 3DS and then like other stuff. I need to get back into this and go down the rabbit hole. But yeah, if you're only wanting to play retro games, go for the Ayan Neo Pocket DS, the most lowest tier. But before you do that, I want to talk about the AYN Thor, because I think if you're only doing retro, I think the AYN Thor is the better option of the two, unless you want the bigger screen. I know I'm jumping around a lot, but let me continue talking about the Ayan Neo. So the Ayan Neo Pocket DS. Also, they have, obviously, it's a dual screen. Like I mentioned, it's a 7-inch OLED screen for the primary top screen and 165 Hz and 800 nits brightness. I don't know the metric for brightness that well, but 7 inches, that would be pretty significant. Like, for example, my Ayan Neo Mini has a 5.5 inch, and let me pull that out real quick. I don't have a ruler on me, but if you have, here's this. It's the size of a Coke can, or less. Well, the lengthwise. So yeah, when it comes to, so I do believe Russ at Retro Game Corp made a comment once that for when it comes to modern games, they're a lot easier to play on a bigger screen, which I do agree with that sentiment mostly. And I say mostly because even though this is only a 5.5 inch screen, I haven't had to strain my eyes that much, like, and so, but 7 inches you will be able to play a lot more comfortably, especially if you're getting older in the eyes like I am. So 7 inches is pretty good with 1080p, and it's a pretty bright screen, whereas the secondary screen is a 5-inch LCD screen with a 4. What sticks out to me more is the second screen, the 4:3 aspect ratio, which is perfect for like GBA and N64 emulation. So a lot of people will say like, oh, you can use one screen for watching a YouTube video and another screen for productivity. I'm not using this for productivity. This shit's a toy for me. I'm gonna make a few YouTube videos out of it, but this is for fun. Don't make me do work on this shit. But that is a nice aspect ratio. That means you can keep the original, like, you don't have to stretch out your gameplay at all when it comes to the secondary screen. And the processor is pretty current and premium. It's going to be running the Snapdragon Gen 3 X Gen 2 with Adreno 832 GPU. I don't know what that GPU means. And we're using Snapdragons as opposed to, dang, I forgot the name of the, there's a lot. Snapdragon is the main compatible processor when it comes to emulation, as opposed to the competing one that it was a Dimensity MediaTek 1100 at the time. Yeah, so even if you're using a comparable chipset, like say for example the Dimensity, I know I'm just pulling a number out of my ass, 2500 compared to the Snapdragon Gen 3. The Snapdragon is still going to run games better because it's more optimal. Well, the developers, I would imagine, of these different emulators are working more with the Snapdragon processor in mind. I don't know how the compatibility works, but Snapdragon is the better option when it comes to Android as compared to Dimensity. And then for the battery, it's coming with an 8000 milliamp battery and a PC grade quote unquote cooling system, which I would imagine just means those are a bigger fan in the emulator. And so when it comes to RAM, like I mentioned in my tangent before, it goes, the lowest tier is at 8 gigabytes and the highest goes to 16 gigabytes of RAM. So as for the build, it's basically just a 3DS but bigger. It looks clean, as all Ayan Neo products do. So say for clamshell build, the form factor is approximately like 180 degrees, 180 millimeters lengthwise, 102 height, and then 25 millimeters depth. And I would imagine this is when the emulator itself is closed and not open. The weight's around 540 grams. So yeah, that's the premium option. And when it comes to the prices, how their Indiegogo up. So like I mentioned, the lowest tier price was at $401, and their most highest tier. And then I forgot to mention the color SKUs. So they do have 2 additional options for colors as outside of black, which is their yellow and the gray. But those 2 color options are only available on their most highest tier product and emulator, which kind of sucks. So you have to invest in the SKU if the color black really bothers you that much. So their lowest tier ranges from $400 or $399, and that gives you 8 gigabytes of RAM. Which, if you're trying to do modern emulation, I would go a little bit higher than that. Next up, and it goes up by increments. Actually, no, this one's $40 more, and that gives you 12 gigabytes of RAM with 256 gigabytes of internal storage. And then next up after that, you'll get 16 gigabytes of RAM with 512 gigabytes of internal storage. And then that's when you get into the color SKU, different color SKU options, which you have a yellow option, which is the same amount of RAM as the previous one for 16 gigabytes, and then but 1 terabyte of internal storage, similar to the gray model, 16 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte of internal storage. Like I mentioned, when it comes to internal storage, I don't focus too much on it because you can just buy a micro SD card. But I wouldn't pay $100 more just to change the color of the device. But that's just me. But like I mentioned, during their Indiegogo week, AYN kind of they probably timed this perfectly, but they announced and trickle fed their new device, the AYN Thor, which they have 2 SKUs when it comes to their processor. They have the Snapdragon 865, and which I think is the same as the Retro Pocket 5, and then then the Snapdragon Gen 2, which is actually the exact same one you'll find on the Odin 2, the Odin 2 Mini, and the Odin 2 Portal, I think it's called. But going back to the smaller SKU, the Snapdragon 865 comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of internal storage, and that starting price is only $249 as opposed to Ayaneo's $399. So let's say $400 versus $250. And like I mentioned, if you're only playing retro games, you don't need that extra power. Go look up a Retro Pocket 5 testing video. I'm sure you can find them from Retro Game Corp, Tech Dweeb, Retro Tech Dad, Joey's Retro Handheld. And si nomás hablas de español, te voy a enseñar. Hay un señor que se llama Tuberviejuner. Sus videos también chingones, también bien detallado y bien profesional. Conocí a este canal cuando estaba buscando información en mi Retro Pocket 4 Pro, y él da su tipo de video de bien informativo. So voy a dejar un link abajo de mi video y si estás interesado aprender más de emulators, y si nada más hablas español, pero él es otra opción para conocer más información del AYN Thor y el Ayaneo Pocket DS. So yeah, going back to the AYN Thor, so that is just, please, if you're getting just this device for DS, 3DS, or Wii U, just get the AYN Thor. Even though I'm looking at their homepage right now, I don't think they have an actual Indiegogo, but you're gonna be able to pre-order it straight off their website, and the pre-orders go up in 1 day and 21 hours. Like I said, they're just trying to steal Ayaneo's thunder. But next up is, so they have the Snapdragon 865, 8GB, 128 gigabytes internal storage SKU, and then above that, that's when their 8 Gen 2 SKUs start to like pop up. So if you're looking for an 8 Gen 2, which has been able to run everything that I throw at it, and a quick caveat, whatever, nowadays what's more bottlenecking these devices is not so much the emulator themselves or the processing power in the hardware. It's more so the optimization of all the software like WinLater, Sudachi, Yuzu. I think there's a PlayStation 3 emulator on Android now. Sorry, but yeah, it's not an issue. You don't need the most fanciest 8 Gen 3 SX or whatever the hell you want to call it. The AYN Thor, the 8 Gen 2 has sufficient enough processing power in order to meet all your emulation needs. But if this is the only device that you're getting for like the next 5 years or whatever, yeah, get the Ayan Neo, because that way you can future-proof it a bit, and because maybe in 5 years we will need more powerful chipset. But yeah, so the lowest tier 8 Gen 2 chipset with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of internal storage is $300, which is still $100 cheaper than the lowest tier Ayan Neo Pocket DS. And there is a 12 gigabyte 256 SKU for $349, and then there's a 16 gigabyte 1 terabyte SKU for $429. And like I mentioned, I don't care about the internal storage, but when it comes to emulation, you kind of need the extra raw RAM power. So I think 12 gigabytes is the sweet spot at $350. And the cool thing about AYN is not only do they have more color SKUs, but they're not hidden behind a paywall. So whether you're getting the cheapest Snapdragon 865 SKU or the most expensive, they have names right here. So the AYN Thor Lite, AYN Thor Base, AYN Thor Pro, and the AYN Thor Max. So even if you're getting the Lite or the Max, you're gonna have 4 color options: all black, all white, 8-bit, which is gray device with colored face buttons, or the clear purple, which is kind of like more of a retro N64 type of look. I'm torn between the clear purple and the gray with color face buttons. But yeah, this chipset is more than sufficient enough. And I'll be honest, so I guess the comparisons is on the pro side for Ayaneo is that they have more experience with clamshell devices. And a disclaimer, AYN and Retroid are sister companies, and apparently the Retroid Pocket 2 Flip has been getting like small cracks in the hinge, so it kind of like fucks them over. But I have had this for a year now, and I'll be honest, towards the end of the year I did have a swollen battery, but AYN was responsive and they responded well to me turning in. I managed to get my battery swapped out, so I sent this over to AYN. I had to pay out of pocket for the shipping and handling going over there to their company in China, and they paid for the shipping and handling coming back, and they replaced my battery for free. And this has been working ever since. And this wasn't until the tail end of the 1 year warranty window. So yeah, their customer service, at least I can speak on that, is pretty efficient at getting things fixed. And I used and abused this docked mode. I took it to Mexico City. I had my fun with it. Now it's time for a dual screen version of it. But yeah, so let's go back into more details of the AYN Thor. So the AYN Thor, the primary screen, the top screen, is going to be an inch smaller than the Ayan Neo, which the AYN Thor is going to have 6-inch OLED. And this has a 5.5 inch, not OLED, but I forgot what it was called. Let me look it up. It was a mini LED, and it looked beautiful, especially coming off of a Retroid Pocket 4 Pro, which I just got. And this is kind of like a quick disclaimer for all emulators, all emulation. Don't ever feel rushed, don't ever feel FOMO, because they come out with new shit every 6 months. And then not only, we're just talking about AYN and Ayaneo, but there's also Ambernick, there's Miu, and there is Pow Kitty, and there's a lot of smaller devs or creators that create these emulators. Like, just go on TechTweep's channel or Russ from Retro Game Corp, and he's able to make a living just reviewing each of the devices. That's because they come out with so fucking many. So don't ever feel like you're missing out or pressure to pre-order this. But if it's something you really want, I do recommend getting it during the early bird prices special. And that's something I forgot to mention with the Ayan Neo and the AYN. Their prices will go up after the early bird window. I don't think it states it right here how long that lasts, but just don't feel pressured into getting any of these devices. At the end of the day, it's just, and on top of, not only do these companies come out with these new iterations every 6 months, but it's a fucking video game. If you need to pay your bills, pay your bills. But yeah, so next up would be AYN. And sorry, I keep jumping around, I keep going back and forth. So we went over the display. The secondary display is a 3.92 inch OLED 60Hz. So yeah, the AYN Thor, the refresh rate on the top screen and the bottom screen will be lower, but it's not too much of a significant difference, especially if you're playing like older retro games. You don't need all that high-tech refresh rate. So the processor is 864 or the Gen 2, which we went over. The battery is smaller, coming at 60 milliamp battery. So this thing has a 5000 milliamp battery, but I don't know how that compares. So I've never had issues with battery life on my AYN Odin 2 Mini, but this is only one screen. I would imagine the battery is gonna be powering both screens. So yeah, but I haven't. So we're gonna have to wait for like people to do testing videos and stress test these devices in order to see how much battery. But I will say one thing, I know it's gonna have a shit ton more longer battery life than the Windows version, which would be Ayaneo and AYN. And the thing about the hinges also, Ayan Neo can also have problems, and I haven't had any Ayan Neo products, but on top of that, which means I haven't had any experience with their customer service. So yeah, the design, just like the Ayan Neo, they're both based off of the Nintendo 3DS XL. And so yeah, my final thought, I'm getting the AYN Thor. Yeah, I don't need a premium device to just so I can dick around with DS, 3DS, and Wii U emulation, and make a few YouTube videos out of it. But yeah, I'm excited to finally get an actual dedicated dual screen Android emulator. I know we kind of had that with the OneXSugar, but that was more of a transformative chocolate bar / dual screen emulator, and it was really chonky when you were had a single screen mode. Let me know what you guys think down below. Comment, like, subscribe if you're gonna get this, or you're just gonna wait, or you can just wait out until the reviews come in. And like I mentioned, maybe in 6 months the AYN Thor 2 is gonna come out, which I wouldn't doubt, and then the Ayan Neo Pocket DS 2 will be out, or announced at least. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Bye, and have a nice night.